This is the story of an American veteran finding his Vietnamese love after half a century apart. Back in the day, before they parted ways, a dashing young soldier named Ken Riesing handed 50 envelopes to a Vietnamese girl named Thúy Lan. With tears in their eyes and a deep, lingering attachment, Ken made her a promise. "When the last envelope is sent, I'll come back for you, my first love." But time marched on. All 50 letters were delivered, and yet they lost touch. Their beautiful romance faded, leaving behind a trail of regrets. Fast forward 50 years. Ken, now over 70, is a gray-haired man living alone with his little cat in Ohio. He'd been married once, but had no kids, and now he's single again. In these quiet final years, a longing for that first love hit him hard. It takes him back to 1966, when he enlisted at just 20 years old. 2 years later, as the Vietnam War raged at its fiercest, Ken found himself stationed at the Long Binh base in Bien Hoa, Quang Nai, working at the U.S. Army's Data Service Center. The evenings there dragged on, monotonous and heavy, so he'd wander over to the YM Club for a beer. That's when fate stepped in. His eyes caught hers, a Vietnamese waitress, and he was smitten from that very first glance. From then on, Ken became a regular at the club, not for the drinks, but to steal quiet looks at her. One day, their gazes locked again. She gave him a shy smile, and that was it. They started talking. Soon, they were a pair. Every weekend after Lan came back from church, they'd meet near the barracks. It was a simple, tender love, blooming amid the chaos of war. But like so many American Vietnamese romances back then, the order to withdraw shattered everything. A strange distance crept between them. Their conversations dwindled. After wrestling with his thoughts, Ken finally asked her, "Lan, will you come with me to America?" It was as close to a proposal as he could muster. She loved him. Oh, she did. But as the eldest in her family, she couldn't leave Vietnam behind for a distant land. Ken honored her choice and left alone. The day before their final goodbye, he bought those 50 envelopes, numbered them from 1 to 50, and gave them to her with that heartfelt vow. "When the last letter is sent, I'll be on my way back to you." A year later, every letter was gone, but he hadn't returned. "I thought about re-enlisting," Ken recalls, "but everyone was against it. Americans back then despised the Vietnam War and anyone tied to it. Ken hated it too, but that promise to Lan gnawed at him. He tried over and over to find a way back. When the U.S. pulled out and the Long Binh base disappeared, so did their connection. Life moved on for Lan too. She married someone else, but it didn't last. Just a year before they split. Since then, she's raised her child alone. Meanwhile, Ken's promise lingered in the back of her mind, fading with time. Then, in June 2019, something stirred in him. He posted on social media with 8 old photos of a girl, about 17, full of youth. "Hello, I'm Ken Riesing, a veteran from Long Binh, Bien Hoa, 1969. I met and loved a girl named Thúy Lan. She worked at the EM Club there. She'd be around 70 now. I've never stopped thinking about her. I promised I'd come back, but for so many reasons, I couldn't. I just want to find her, to know she's alive and happy. I won't disrupt her life." He didn't expect much, but miracles happen. That post spread like wildfire online, and people tracked her down. Lan was still in Bien Hoa, Thanh Binh Ward, scraping by selling porridge. Half a world apart, they'd both assumed this life would never bring them together again. Yet there they were, arranging to meet at Tân Sơn Nhất Airport. After 50 long years, they stood face to face. Lan wore a green áo dai, his favorite, and when Ken stepped off that plane, time seemed to dissolve. "It felt like a dream," she says. "Someone loving me, remembering me, for 50 years. Having him as a soulmate to talk to every day, No need for wealth or power. That's more than enough for my life. They couldn't hold back the tears. They hugged tight, and Ken kept brushing the tears from her face, his touch tender. I'm so happy she's alive and well, he says. Before we met, I'd hoped she'd wear that traditional Vietnamese áo dai. And when I saw her at the airport in it, after 50 years, her hair's shorter, but her face, her smile, still the 16-year-old I fell for. Ken only had 14 days in Vietnam, but he made them count. He asked her again, "Come with me to America. Let's get married. Finish what we started 50 years ago." Though they're both old now, he meant it. Her kids and grandkids cheered them on, but Lan paused. "I need time to think," she said. They'd only just reunited. There was still so much unknown between them. Fate's a funny thing. 50 letters marked their loss. 50 years brought them back. That number, 50, feels like it was written in the stars for them.